Hi, everyone. Welcome to our authorization modeling event. We are going to get started in 1 minute. And just so you know, we're about to start recording so that we can send this out to folks who registered but couldn't attend. So you're going to hear a notification that says the recording is started. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our event on authorization modeling, or how we learn to stop worrying and embrace common authorization patterns. We're going to introduce you to our hosts first, but before we get started, just so you know, a few of the OSO engineers who build some of the products that you use or some of the products that you've tried are on the Zoom, and they know they can, answer some of the questions that you have as we go through the event. So they're here on the chat to do that. For those of you who are here, as you know, we promised you limited edition OSO swag. Here's a little image of that. At the end of the webinar, we're going to send out a type form to the Zoom chat to have you fill out your information so we can ship that stuff over to you. We will send that out. So just keep your eye on your Zoom. But without further ado, I will hand it off to Jed and Jake.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you everybody for attending. We want to have a special thanks for both Gabe and Jonathan, who are in the chat and are here to answer questions or just generally get involved with you all about modeling and authorization, and a bunch of other folks from OSO here are here as well. But I also want to introduce, by the way, I'm Jed, head of product at OSO. Here we have a special guest, Jake Hawks from Sibi, and Jake is a staff engineer there. Jake, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yep, and Jake helped us during our discovery process on this modeling tool that we built, and like the problem of modeling and authorization. Jake has been really helpful for us and has been really involved in some different discovery processes with us. So thank you, Jake, for being here, and thank you all, as always, for being involved in authorization stuff. So let's jump in. Jake, why do they call you the remarkable flamingo? Please tell us.
Well, I've heard a couple stories thrown around. One of them was that my first introduction to OSO, or OSO's first introduction to me, was at a restaurant in Midtown, and I happened to be wearing a pink suit that day, but I had also recently sprained my ankle playing volleyball, so I had one of those little scooter things for one of my knees. And somebody, I think it was Jordan, threw out the term, and then the rest was history.
Yeah.
The other story I heard is that it was just randomly assigned to me as a Zoom username once on one of our calls. I don't remember which story's true though.
Yeah, no, I think when you join Excalidraw, if you're not a normal Excalidraw user, you get a randomized name. It might have been that, I don't know. I think the first story was actually the real story. There will be a Q&A later, and if you get the right answer, then you get some prizes. Okay, so I'm gonna come back to slides a couple of times for polls, but so I don't want to stop sharing my screen. But I do want to start with like, let's talk about authorization. Jake, how did you get involved in authorization? What was your first, how did you dip your toe into the icy waters?
Well, I've only dipped my toes into the waters prior to joining Sibi, but I joined this company around the beginning of this year, and they had a mostly homegrown authorization solution based on a project called Castle that has not been maintained for a while. And one of the first things they asked me to do was sort of spearhead this authorization replacement. And we looked at a few different options and eventually settled on OSO Cloud as the route forward.
So when you had to do that, was this like a technical drive, like a technical project, or was there like some functionality that you needed that you had to refactor authorization to get, or like what drove the initial, like, we have to replace Castle, we need a new thing?
Mm-hmm. There were a few different things. The biggest gripe that we heard was that it was really hard to discover permissions. It was really difficult with Castle to figure out why some user couldn't do something that you thought they should. The management of all the the facts, so-called, in Castle was just it was a huge lift, and it was a pain to keep everything sorted. And so that was sort of our biggest driver, I think, for finding a replacement. Was just I guess a technical hurdle. It was just such a struggle to work with.
Gotcha. Okay. That I'm kind of interested in how other people have encountered. There's a lot of people here. Ostensibly, you've all had some involvement in authorization, or else you probably wouldn't be here. So I'm kind of interested in what you all, like, how did you get involved? Were you at the beginning of a new application and you had to think of how do you deal with authorization then? Were you adding some new functionality to your app that required some more collaborative experiences and therefore you needed some more robust authorization? Or was it like a technical refactoring, like, this isn't working, we have all these issues and we have to go figure out a better way to do this? How did you get involved in authorization? So we're going to open up a poll and see how you all have been involved.
Poll results are coming in. Oh, this is fun. We have 65% participation.
Nice.
72. Wow. It's higher than voter turnout in the United States.
It's a lot easier than voting in the United States. Also,
fair enough.
I didn't have to take a day off of work so I could do this. Well, actually, just 30 minutes or so. But
some might argue we've got better options in this poll also.
Zing.
All right. So we have most folks coming in. So I'm just gonna.
What do we got? What does it say?
So I'm gonna end the poll and share the results. So can everyone see?
Yeah.
You'll see? Yeah. So most are, it's pretty even between refactoring and building a new app. There's third place is adding new functionality.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So maybe you all could. Would someone like to speak up and say what was the driving force with refactoring your app? Like, what was the technical reason? Anybody who answered that, would you like to unmute yourself and offer the reasoning for that? What your challenge was that caused you to refactor?
For us, it was moving to microservices. So with a monolithic app, right, it's so easy to I'll just put all the logic in here and okay, cool. With microservices, it's like 40 chess trying to figure out, all right, how do I authorize this request that spans multiple microservices, yada, yada, yada. So we needed a centralized solution that could be accessed from all over our application footprint.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, there's some additional data challenges you have to think about that you probably didn't have to think about before when you were in a monolith, and that totally makes sense. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. All right, so I want I want to move into like doing some modeling. Let's like take a shift for a second. I got this Excalidraw up here. I went and read a bunch of crap about domain modeling. And there's, by the way, like many years of like documentation of domain modeling. I think I found a really good academic article from the late 90s about domain modeling and how to do it. It was written by some folks with PhDs who spent a lot of time on it. But then over the years, there's been a lot of articles written about how to do this and like what are the key things to do. And I've tried to synthesize those down into a handful of key steps about like what it is that the best practices would have you do and how do you do this. And it really comes down to, you have to like think about identifying the core concepts and entities in your application. You got to like think about brainstorm is the specific guidance given, a list of concepts and entities like nouns in your application, objects that you might need to include, and then think about like, do you keep those abstract? Do you generalize those, or do they need to be hyper specific? You have to like think about the relationships between those entities and identify what kind of relationship they have. Do they have like dependencies? Are they just associated? Is there like a cardinality of the direction of the association or the relationship? Is one like kind of nested up under another one? Is it hierarchy? There's all kinds of things you have to think about there. You have to specify a bunch of characteristics of those different entities, like age of a user or location of a user or whatever. There's like lots of things about that you have to go through. And then you have to think about like behaviors. What can these things do? What can these entities do to other entities or resources? And so there's a lot of like very open-ended sort of unstructured guidance to like go think about lots of stuff and write lots of things down. And that feels really hard to get your head around to me. And then all throughout, they're like, get input from others and iterate on it and document it and blah, blah, blah. And then the last one I just added myself, which was like, implement it. You got to like do something with all this at some point. And so this really felt really open-ended to me, but I want to try going through some of this with you, Jake, if you would, about the Sibi model. So I have some space down here. It feels like a lot to me, but let's just start with like identifying concepts. First of all, when you did this, Jake, in your own environment, how did you do this? Like, how did you go identify the different things that you had to think about in your model?
So to get started, what I did is I searched for everywhere we were checking permissions, and I, logged those. And based on that, I figured out which entities we had, sort of which ones we were checking permissions against. Was
that in your code base or like in your database, or like where did you do those checks?
Mostly in the code base, and then also the database to make sure I got any that weren't in code.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's start with like really broad concepts in your app. Do you have tenants? Is that a thing that you have?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we've got organizations.
Yeah, you got organizations. All right. Let's talk about like, are there things, if we're going to like define relationships, are there things that organizations are related to? Do they have things underneath them? Is there like a hierarchy of OUs or something like that that's related to organizations?
Yeah, every organization is split into offices, one-to-many offices.
Okay.
Those are generally regional.
Is there anything inside an office?
Yeah, offices are assigned properties. Each office manages a group of properties. Okay, cool. That's good. Is there like a relationship? So these things are a hierarchy. So properties are part of offices and offices are part of organizations. Is that right? Yes.
So there's some kind of relationship here. Boop. I don't know if the arrow makes sense to you. It makes sense to me to put the arrow in that direction, but properties are inside offices. Offices are inside organizations. Okay, so we got some relationships. There's some cardinality there. So we're kind of doing these things up here. We've determined some core concepts and entities. We've talked about some relationships between those entities. What about like users? Let's talk about your users. What kind of users do you have?
Well, we've got members and admins. in organizations and offices. And then we've also got a role we called staff that's sort of a global role.
Okay. So our staff sounds like they're internal users?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So you got internal users or staff, then you have members and admins that are like users. Okay. All right, cool. That's cool. And ostensibly they have like different permissions, right? They have like different things that each one of them can do, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the staff for a second. What's a thing that a staff user can do?
Staff user could create an office. No one else is allowed to do that.
Okay. All right.
What else? They can impersonate.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And they can view cream.
View what?
Cream. CREAM. It's a page in our app that's sort of for managing organizations.
Okay. All right. Nice. Okay. So I think if I'm following the best practices, we just took like a single use case on like a couple of use cases. One of them is like you have some hierarchy, right? You have organizations, offices, and properties that are all related to each other. You have an internal staff user who can create offices, impersonate users, and view cream. And those all like exist as part of the organization level. Is that where they would be attached? Or across the whole app or something?
Yeah, these are a little more global.
Okay, got it. So we like define some behaviors from what they can do, create, office, impersonate, view cream. And we've specified some characteristics. The characteristics are this type of user is an internal user, that's a staff user. So I think we've like done this. That's an example of doing these four things. How do you think about getting input from other people? Because this is one of the things it says to do. You're supposed to like go get input from other people. So now that you've like documented some things, how did you go get input from other people?
Well, in my case, we were already starting to lean into OSO, so we actually just did some pair programming as a team and started writing our policy file.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, we had to talk about what we defined as, an entity and which things belonged as permissions on which entities.
Okay. Got it.
So.
Okay. So this style of just brainstorming to try to meander your way through all these use cases, open-ended, sort of seems like it could take a really long time, and it might leave you feeling like you might have missed stuff. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing it. We just sort of took one step at a time, and we knew that we had a lot of different steps to take in various directions. And we still don't know. Well, I mean, we've got everything we needed, but there's still places where we can implement more. How
long did it take you to get like through these like initial kind of just wrapping your head around what you had and like what you needed kind of phase?
Trying to remember. It probably took us around a month of time here and there to nail it all down.
Right.
And that was just sort of to get the foundation down, and then we sent it out to our various domain teams to get sort of their input on that, and then they were able to build on that, and it was a similar process sort of over again for each of them.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm kind of interested now to see like other folks here in attendance have probably, assuming have been involved in this. So I'm kind of interested in like, what do you think the hardest part of modeling is? What's really annoying? Like, what was really annoying for you, or what do you imagine would be the most annoying part for you in your organization? Thinking through like having to go through this process, what would be really painful for you? So, Francesca, if you get your poll up, cool.
All right. All right, we have
Gabe's documentation.
9. Oh, wow. Okay. Participation went up. I guess it takes a while to read all the answers. So biggest pain points in modeling. We have 67% participation. Can we get up to our high of 79? Can we beat 79?
What's it looking like so far?
It might require Jake and Gabe to participate.
What's it looking like so far?
So we are looking like, ooh, whoa, just flipped. Thinking through all the options and all of the above. Oh, wow.
All of the above,
okay.
Yeah.
And then getting alignment, confidence.
Okay.
Those are the same. All right. So I'm going to end the poll and share with everyone. Oh, 80% participation. Very cool.
Nice. We did it. We did it.
All right. We're going to share the results. So I'm just going to take a little screenshot so that we have
yeah.
But
okay.
The biggest pain points in modeling, all of the above.
Okay, cool.
But
good.
Thinking through all the options and writing it down.
Okay. So that's the like high level process that has been described by the industry thus far as the way to do modeling, and applying authorization to that means that you come away with like a very long process that's challenging, and it doesn't leave you feeling very confident in where you're at, like that you got it right or that you covered all your bases. So let's try something different. Let me see here. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to use this modeler tool that we put together. So in order to get to the modeler, you just go to ui.osohq.com/modeler. You go there and you land here, and we start you off with some concepts built into a model that are sort of like GitHub-esque concepts to get you like understanding how this works and what it looks like. I'm just going to delete those so we can start from scratch. Okay. Let's talk through a couple of things, Jake, that we just went over with your model. So I think that you said something about, let me go back to this. You said something about, organizations, offices, properties. All right, let's talk about the resource hierarchy then. There's some kind of resource hierarchy there. So let's go add a new use case. And I'm going to go to resource hierarchies and inheritance. So you can see here, when you click on add a new use case, we have these categories where we've bucketed different use cases underneath the categories. So you can kind of like get to things that make sense for different parts of your model. So if we go to resource hierarchies and inheritance, and then we go to tenants are subdivided into organizational units. I think that you said that your tenants have groups inside them. So let's start with that. So let's personalize that. We start you with some defaults in here. What did you call it? Are yours called organization also?
Yes, they are.
And what were like one level below that? What was that called?
Office.
Office, that's right. Okay. Sorry, I have bad short-term memory. And the members of your tenants are called members? Is that?
Yeah, we call them members and admins at both of those levels.
That's convenient.
There is.
And that are members of, let's see here. Boop. Are members of the offices also the same members and admins? Is that what they are?
Yes.
Okay. What actions can they perform? Like what can a member do?
Oh, let's see. A member on an organization can read, which is what we call sort of just getting the data from our graph endpoint. They can view users in the organization.
All right.
You can view the organization detail page.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Yeah.
What about some things that an admin can do in addition to what a member can do, because it's additive?
Yeah, an org admin could invite and kick people.
Okay. That's sweet.
They could edit a user's role. Update user role, maybe.
Okay. Anything else fun that they can do? Any stream related activities that they can do?
Stream related? No. Those are staff only. They can view the office settings page.
View settings?
View office settings.
Office settings, okay. All right. So we've added a bunch of things here. What I'm showing you here is an example of how in these use cases that we've defined, which are, after talking to lots and lots of customers, they've told us what common authorization specific use cases they have, and we've kind of narrowed this list down to what common authorization use cases you might have for your application. What we're doing here is we're doing an example of identifying core concepts and entities. And so that's what like adding the names of the organization and the names of office and things like that are in the names of the users and that kind of thing. That's all like just different nouns that we're adding to your model to help you identify those concepts and entities. We customize that. We're going to add this to our model. So now on the model page, you can see that you have tenants subdivided into organizational units, and we've described the different personalizations that you have for this. So you can see the different custom nouns that you have for your organization, your office, and the different types of permissions they have. Let's talk about, I think there was another thing that we talked about over here. Down here on, let's see, members and admins. Let's specify some more detail about members and admins. So let me see here. We're going to go to add a use case, multi-tenancy and B2B, and then tenants have members and admins. So let's personalize this. So you said that you have members, admins, and then there's some different things members can do at the org level, right? So this isn't at the office level, it's at the org level. Are there different things that members can do at the org level?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Those previous ones I gave you were at the org level.
Okay, here, we can edit those. Yeah, these are at tenant subdivision, so that's okay. Let's just add these to the new use case just so we can see. Okay. Yeah. Personalize. So members, admins, they can view, I'm assuming members can view, they can.
Yeah, members can, they can read the office, or we're at org now, sorry. They can read the organization. They can view the view users in the organization.
Okay. Okay, cool. What can admins do that's on top of that, like additive to that?
They can invite and kick. They can update the organization.
Okay. Cool.
View office setting. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So let's add that to our model. All right. So we have tenants have members and admins. And you can see the personalization here, the specific nouns. The other thing I want to mention is sometimes like it's helpful to when you're thinking about like do I feel confident this is actually what I have? You want to see examples of different like concrete examples of things you're used to. So in this case, like Slack and GitHub, Google Workspace, we're showing you examples of how this use case could is like exist in their application. So you can look at it and go, you know what, I do have, it is kind of like how GitHub has users and owners of an organization. This is like that. And it should serve to help you feel a little bit more confident in the choice you've made about the use case that you've selected. So let's add like, let's see, what about, you had one about internal users, right? With staff or something like that. They could do things. Let's go add a user like that. So we have a category called internal employees and back office roles, super admins. I think that's what you have. You have like a staff user, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we call it.
Okay, got it. So staff users have like a super admin role. So let's add that. So now we have super admins can do everything across the entire app. And the other thing I want to point you to is like this documentation here. So one of the things, like when you're getting closer to implementation, because one of the things you have to think about later is like selecting a solution about how to solve for these use cases, or like implementing a solution for this. You get into like, how do I do this? And one thing that it could be helpful is to see more documentation on a particular pattern that is associated with this use case. So in this case, we're like telling you, this use case is a global roles use case, and here's some documentation about how to think about that global roles use case. And we'll link you to documentation to help you like think through that more. All right, so I want to pause for a second because we just added a few things from your model, and like this is kind of how the process would go with the modeler. Before, when we were doing this, we were kind of like doing this like open-ended, try to remember all the things we have, try to remember how all of the things related to each other. And now we have this option to go look at use cases and go through categories that have been selected for us and choosing use cases out of those categories that are already written in authorization terms and like as a use case that you would have for your application. So it kind of narrows it down. It takes away some of the open-endedness of this, like, just think of everything and don't forget anything. Also, like, we're also going through each of these steps. Like, we're identifying core concepts and entities, determining relationships and characteristics and behaviors. And we've kind of squished all that into that, like, we've written out these use cases for you that combined a lot of these things, that combined a lot of these steps into a single use case selection step. So this is like a different way to think about how to model out specifically authorization for your application. And we've done a lot of the like research for you on your behalf. And so you can use this to come up with the different use cases that you might have for your application. Let's see here. But there was something else. Like, I think that we've talked about, you and I have actually had a conversation about like different things that you could add to your model and extend your model with. But I'm interested in like what other things people here might be, how they may be thinking about extending their authorization. Like, what causes you to need to change your authorization around, or like extend or add to your authorization model? So in the chat, maybe if you could just like, what is a thing that causes you to think about your authorization model? What's like is it like, what new functionality or what new like refactoring jobs might have to be done that will cause you to go, crap, I have to like think about my authorization, I have to extend it, I have to document something new, I have to update it. What are those things that drive that? I'm looking at chat. So Angie says, adding new types of resources or access processes. Whoops, this never had authorization. Wah, wah. Okay, that's probably far more common than we would all like to admit, which is why they say have people look at this, like share this with your security experts on your team. That's why the domain modeling guidance says that.
Yeah, brave soul for admitting that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's been true for us as well. And at times we've found things where we were using feature flags to solve authorization problems as well, which is a similar vein.
That makes sense. Yeah. I feel like okay. Yeah, I feel like I wonder if there's an opportunity to help identify where there are like gaps by like interrogating your data model or something like that and understanding relationships and then matching it to your, anyways, I'm thinking about new features that we can add, sorry. Trying to plug holes in security proactively. Okay, so yeah, let's move on here. All right. I want to extend this model just a little bit, though. We've been talking about stuff that's like pretty broad and pretty high level. I want to ask you about like something more granular than that. Maybe you can tell me about like, do users have a thing that they touch, that they like own or that they create or something like that? Is there like a resource or something that a user, like a ticket or like a I don't know, something like that maybe a user creates?
The closest thing I can think of off the top of my head is just an order.
Okay.
The user creates an order to go into our system.
Okay. Okay. I'm assuming they have some kind of like special permission or something like that on that order, right?
Yeah, I think so.
What is the permission that they might have on that order that someone else might not have?
Yeah, just viewing the order
Okay.
is probably the biggest one.
Okay. So if they had, oh, what'd you do, Gabe? Just kidding.
Oh boy.
Let's go to, let's see, sharing. Where was I? So sharing, and then users have additional permissions. Just kidding, Gabe. I'm just playing with you. Okay, so we said orders, and then you said view.
View and cancel is another one that
Okay.
some of my teammates are reminding me about.
Oh, you got teammates helping you out. Nice. Okay, awesome. So let's add that to the model. Looks like we lost the state on the other part of that, but that's okay. Speaking of state, how would I have saved that? Let me talk about that. So if I wanted to share this extension, this like added new permission that we just talked about, there's a share button up here, and if I had clicked that earlier, I could have saved the state of the previous model that we had, and you just copy this, and then you can share that with people on your team. So that's one way, like, we are helping you with the concept of like sharing it and getting input from others, sharing it and documenting it. So you can save the state of this model, grab the URL, drop that in like a Confluence page or like a Notion page or something like that, and say, this is actually what our model looks like right now. And if you wanted to share it around to your team for iteration, they could add things, change it, grab a new URL, share that back and say, this is actually the more updated one. And you can kind of iterate on it in that way. The other thing that I think is really helpful, another one of our users that we talked to in a discovery phase, they said, I actually am a shared services team internally, and I have many different teams that I work with, and I have to help facilitate them thinking through their authorization, because we're building some of the core authorization capabilities for them, and they consume it. And so they plan to use this modeling tool to have a conversation with each team to work out their authorization needs and have that, like, do that many different times. So that's another thing you could do. Instead of sharing it around, you could just facilitate a conversation with them to grab their authorization needs, save it, put it in a Notion page as like, service team X, here's my model. And then you could kind of, as a services team, you could implement all of those different service core needs. So the other thing I wanted to mention was, if you're close to implementation, another thing that we've added here, somebody that we were doing discovery with said, this modeling thing is really interesting. As we were discussing earlier, there's lots of things that this could help you, like modeling needs to be solved, that need to be solved for modeling because it's challenging. But on the implementation side, they said this would be hyper valuable for me if you made this easier for me to implement. And so one of the things that we're trying to help people with in that regard is the ability to export to a policy. So in this case, the use case that we just added, if you hit export to OSO Cloud, which soon we'll be able to instantiate this directly into OSO Cloud for you to play with. Right now, it gives you a policy, and you can copy that policy code, put that in OSO Cloud, and play with it. We include both the logic for Polar here about this particular use case, but then we also provide you auto-generated test setup, so that you can once you copy and paste it there, you can play with the test setup and test your logic to see if the asserts work out the way that you thought they would. And the goal here is to help drive like a reduction in the time it takes to get you to the implementation and get you to the point where you can actually test this out, because that's the next phase if you've made changes to your model. Okay, so by the way, how did you like, once you got into implementation, what kind of testing did you do with your model, Jake?
For the first few days, we did very little. And then after breaking things a few times, we saw the value. And now we've got I've been historically primarily a front-end developer, and I think most of testing there is a waste of time. But for this sort of thing, the tests have been very worthwhile. They save far more time than they take to write. And they really make us much more able to add and tweak things with confidence. We can generally know if something's going to break it before we've even made the change with the tests.
Gotcha.
So,
gotcha.
Yeah, that's definitely been one lesson that we learned, is the Polar tests are a huge time saver. Awesome.
That's great. One last thing I wanted to mention in the modeling, in like the modeler, that somebody, I think Ermila, you asked about if we could provide feedback on tricky models. There's an option here for if you can't find the right use case you have. And actually, Jake, I think there's some use cases that you have that we noticed that are maybe really specific, that you might have had that we don't have a specific use case already written for. And if that was the case, we could take, like, do you have one of those off the top of your head that we can add here?
I'm trying to think of some. Our sort of cross-organizational collaborations are between offices
Okay,
instead of the organization.
gotcha.
And so that's a little bit weird, I think, compared to a lot of places. And so I don't think there's a use case quite for that,
Okay.
as I recall. Although I don't know, you guys have been adding use cases regularly, so there might be by now.
There might be, but it helps me illustrate the point that that you can, if you don't find one that feels just right for you, you can let us know here. You can write it in and let us know. And if you still want to add it to your model, so you have it documented, you can still add to your model. And we put that down under members under additional use cases, so you can still capture it as part of the artifact of your model. So you're not missing something. And when you let us know about it, we will review those and add those potentially to a model and put that in the right category for you. So it's easier. The next time you do it, we'll have more personalization and stuff like that. So that's the last thing in here worth mentioning. I did want to bring it back to this, like this idea of the guidance the industry has come up with over the years for how to do modeling. And let's just like go over the things. So there's like identifying core concepts and entities, the relationships and characteristics and behaviors of those entities and concepts. And Modeler helps you do that by canning up these like use cases that we've gathered from, hundreds of conversations we've had with tons and tons of thousands of different teams doing authorization. And then we created these sentences that capture the very specific authorization instant, like the instance of how that looks in an authorization use case. We've captured that and put that in Modeler, and we've allowed you to personalize that. And the sharing the model then is grabbing a link from Modeler, sharing that to your teammates, asking them to go through it and take a look at it, add to it, tell you what they disagree with or agree with, change it, share it back to you. And then you can share that the final thing in like a Notion page or a Confluence page and say, this is a link to our actual model. And so new team members, for instance, who need to come on board and read this and understand what you have in your authorization model, they can click it, they can look through it, they can see documentation links for each of the use cases, take them to a place where they can explain more about like, what actually is this? How does it actually work? And also if they need to extend it, and they want to get closer to implementation, they can use the export to OSO or export to Polar, we'll write the Polar code for you and make that part of and you can make it part of your policy. The last thing I want to mention is that how do we actually suggest you do that? Well, it kind of looks a little bit like this. There is a little bit of a looping effect here, as opposed to you doing what you did, Jake, to begin with, and like spending maybe a month like going through this with brainstorming and these open-ended conversations and whatever, trying to remember all the things. We would suggest that you go through the modeler and look through each use case, which in our testing only took about 5 to 10 minutes for somebody to do, and personalize each one and save it to the model, and then share that out with the people on your team and say, if you think this is wrong, change it, send it back to me. Or facilitate a conversation where you go through each one and say, what do you think? Did we capture it right? Are these nouns correct? Did the verbs that I captured, are they the correct verbs? And then once you have it, you can save it. You can share that in a Notion or a Confluence page, like I said, and you can iterate on that over time. And when you need to update it later on, you can come back to it. You can easily add more use cases. You can change permissions around. You can save it again. So the updating part, you have a document that's linked to the current state. You can update it easily and share that out again. So that's the recommendation for how we would suggest doing modeling going forward, as opposed to doing it the old way. And all of this the Modeler tool is free. So you're able to do this today. Anybody can use it, and we're going to be expanding it, making it better over time. So to wrap it up, our net recommendation is just use Modeler. It'll help you walk through this without an open-ended sort of like, yeah, Robert, free is your favorite price. The Modeler will help you walk through these use cases in a less open-ended way and make sure you cover your bases. And then if you need help, or you do feel like you still aren't super confident, you can always reach out to us and ask us if we'll take a look at it with you, and we'd be happy to do that. We can do that in Slack. So feel free to do that from us. That's all the content I think I have here about modeling. I think that Francesca, you wanted to mention something, no?
Yes, thank you. We are going to put the type form into, 1 second. We're going to put the type form in the chat, so everyone can fill it out with their info, so we can send you the swag. Sorry, just sending that through. But yeah, I'll hand it back to Jed to monitor and facilitate the Q&A.
Cool. Before I do that, I want to say thank you, like a special thanks to Jake for being a guinea pig and helping us out with the research and discovery on this process. So thank you very much, Jake. You've been very helpful. Really appreciate you always. And if you all want to engage with Jake on our Slack, our community Slack, he's there, and where he is known as the flamingo. And you choose the story which you feel best describes the way he got that name. And Jake is there, and he does get involved with folks when you have questions, and we really appreciate that from you, Jake. Thank you very much for your involvement.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for your authorization software. It makes my life a hell of a lot easier.
Sweet. I'm trying to make it better. All right. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or to just ask in chat. We're happy to take questions or anything that you might be interested in.
Hey, Jed, Ahmed here. So first of all, thank you so much. This is amazing. I was just wondering, how do you handle a more dynamic kind of authorization models? I just looked at the modeler and it says Google Drive coming soon, but I was wondering if I have something like, let's say, create a group of things, and maybe that group is dynamically updated based on some kind of a property, and I need to give permissions to some kind of a member to that group. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I'm gonna ask if Gabe has any thoughts on this question.
Sorry, you were asking about the Google Drive example, Ahmed?
Yeah, so that's just one thing that I could think of. But for example, in our case, if you think of authorization, the things that Jed talked about, it's authorization that applies on the whole organization. But what if you need to apply authorization on slices of data? That makes it, and how do you determine what that slice of data is? Is it based on some kind of a parameter, or there's something else that determines that slice? Is it static? Is it dynamic? So how would you model something like that?
Right. Yeah, so Google Drive is actually a great example for that. I think the way that we generally think about authorization models is you can imagine them as different levels of specificity or granularity. So, at the super granular level, you might have a role, and if having that role gives you a permission across your entire application, right? There's no differentiation. It's like, in Google Drive, if you have the editor role, you can edit literally every document in every organization across all of Google's data, and you probably don't want that, right? You probably want something a bit more granular, and so then there are kind of like more granular versions of that, where it's like, okay, you have a role on a particular organization, right? But that role gives edit access across every document in that entire organization. A level more granular than that would be you can have an edit ability on a particular folder within an organization or a particular document, right? And so you can imagine wanting a kind of like a compound or complex authorization system where you have different levels of access for different roles in the kind of like different types of users who are accessing Google Drive, right? Like Google employees might have this like break glass back office role that allows them very expansive access across the entire application. An admin for a particular organization, right? Because Google Drive is very much a multi-tenant software. there might be like an organizational admin that has expansive permissions, but only within a particular organization. And then, there might be like members and admins, of an organization, and those roles might grant you like a default level of access, right? So like by default, a member can view every document in the org, but there might be, exceptions to that. Like if a document has been marked as private, or if, there's some other way of kind of having an elevated or a unique access control system for a document. So generally, like the way that you would structure something like a Google Drive is by taking a lot of these different use cases and combining them together into like a heterogeneous system. Does that make sense, Ahmad?
Yeah, somewhat, but well, thanks for the answer. I'll just keep stalking you online. Thanks.
Cool. Look forward to it.
Ole, did I pronounce your name correctly? Ole. You had a good question about custom roles at the tenant level. Can you want to expand on that?
Yeah, we actually have a use case in our product which covers the tenant level custom roles. So users are able to fully customize the actions which each role is able to perform on the entities, which are also customizable. So basically combining two customization concepts together, which gives you like fully customizable system with customizable relations between the entities. And like we are trying to model with also something like that and cover all of the use cases which are potentially possible. And the granularity on which we are trying to do that is basically on the entity level, which is customizable, going deep on the attributes. So we want to be able to control the access to the attributes, specific attributes to the entities of specific type. How would you recommend modeling something like this?
That's a great question. We're getting beyond, I think, the kinds of things we want to express in this model at all. But it follows a lot the same like principles that are inside this. And this kind of dovetails actually maybe with Ahmed's question. Like a lot of the the way Gabe was describing kind of levels of granularity. You can take some of these, like some of the simpler models we have here, where we talk about like if you have a role, then you have this permission. Like that's a basic role. If you're an admin, you can write and delete. And you want to if you want to start making those things more dynamic, more user driven, there's what you do inside OSA is you take that thing that was previously static, you can delete if you're an admin, and you start turning into a dynamic thing based on data that says things like, you have a permission on a resource if you have a role and the role grants a permission. That, role grants permission would now potentially be a piece of dynamic data input by a user. That kind of thing just goes on and on. You keep trying to find the same general pattern, and maybe starting from the concrete use case is a good place to start. Like, what does it look like for one person? Can I describe that? And then just, try and make the parts that are customizable, the parts that are dynamic, move those from being logic into data. That's kind of like the generic approach I'd take. I think, we are planning, I believe, on adding custom roles as like an example to this modeler. But yeah, I think some of those really interesting use cases we could do. Is probably a live conversation to be had.
I think what I find the most challenging in this is actually how to put additional permissions or access to some entities based on the context of those entities and the relations they have in regards to other entities. So like how the access propagates, through like hierarchical or associative relations.
Yeah, and I think literally the example that I think Jed's got on his screen here is a good one. We say, for example, and again, this is maybe a simpler example that you'd want to build on, but in this like hierarchical model, we'd say, you can have files and folders, and anything you can do on the folder, you can then do on a file that belongs to it. And that's kind of like an example of like one of those hops. And maybe sounds like what you're looking for is taking that kind of general idea. If I have access to a thing like a folder, then I have some other access on resources that belong to it, like those files.
Thanks.
Thanks for the question. Okay. I think that we're approaching time. Let's see here. I think the last thing I just wanted to mention to you was if you're looking for help with modeling and capturing your modeling, your authorization modeling needs, then I would urge you to start with Modeler. And then there's definitely a lot of documentation links which could link you to more detailed questions or thoughts on what to do next. For instance, with that, like a more complex custom roles use case. We do have custom roles in the Modeler, but as an option for a use case. However, like really fleshing that out more, you probably want to look at some documentation on that. I think Graham suggested some, but there's also some that you can find on our website. And if you need help with any of this stuff, you can also go to our community Slack, and we are always happy to help you. If you want to have a conversation about this, feel free to hit us up, and we will set up some time. We'll give you a Calendly link, and you can grab some time that works for you, and we can talk through how to do that. But thank you all very much for attending. Again, special thanks to Jake for helping out with this. And we appreciate you and Sibi as customers. And everybody else, thank you for attending. And if you need any help from us, you know where to find us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Francesca, you want to end the Zoom session?
How do I get some of this swag? And then I was like, you seem like a
Sorry, Graham came in. How's it going?
It's going. You want to kill the Zoom?
Yeah. I'm just trying to save the chat. I want to make sure that it's like we saved everything. Okay. Yeah, I think that was it. Awesome.
Bye, Kay Higgins.
Bye. All right, y'all, I'm gonna drop off. Wait, Jed, were you recording? Oh no.
Sam is recording. It says Sam is recording this call.